Welcome, everybody. We're talking spoilers to or about Marriage Story. Obviously, our review has been up for a little bit because I was able to see it early in the theater. However, I'm joined with Theo and Lindsay. And first time guest, Evan. Okay, well, and we're here spoiling Marriage Story. All of the hosts that are here can go into spoilers as much as they want for how much they enjoy this movie. If you guys want to check out my review to get my thoughts, so that way I don't have to repeat myself, feel free to do that on our channel. It's one of the newer videos. This movie floored me with the beginning. I think like the first 2 minutes are some of the best like cold openings I've seen, which is interesting that Lindsay says it's sort of, maybe meanders. I don't want to mix what Lindsay was saying, but just that cold opening of, you have each of them talking about, oh, well, I love this and this about someone, and anybody can relate to that, and you're completely on board. You're like, oh yeah, like this is a very happy couple, and it goes immediately to that therapy scene. I thought was like the perfect way to put you in this mood. I don't know if you guys had sort of favorite things or things you want to touch on. We can just sort of bounce around now.
I'm curious what your guys' favorites are, Lindsay and Evan, because I don't think I've, or at least Evan, I don't think I've talked about this one with you yet.
Well, just the thing about the beginning, I actually really like I said, the very beginning when they're going over what they wrote about one another, I think that was really good. And then also, I didn't expect it to also transition so fast into like that. Oh, they're like in counseling, and it's already like, it's like 5 minutes in the movie, and like I knew it was a really long movie, so I thought maybe like it would progressively like get to that point, like that's what the whole movie was gonna be about. But it kind of like throws you for a loop right in the beginning. So I thought that was like interesting. And then like, but that also I can understand why like Lindsay would say that it meanders a little bit too much, like in certain parts of the beginning, like the first act, I guess.
It's not really that I thought it meandered. I thought it was really good, like first half of the movie or whatever. I just didn't see anything that like
I didn't mean to put words in your mouth. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I
Yeah,
didn't dislike the beginning. I was just going into it expecting like a 4.4 average movie, So I was like, I had very, very high expectations. So I was like, I was just like, I'm waiting for this to become mind blowing,
Well, I also thought, just touching on the beginning part, the beginning almost promised to me that we were sort of going to be jumping around in this couple's history, which I was really excited to see, because I think that's something that's touched on really well. I don't know if you guys have seen Blue Valentine.
Yes. Oh God.
Yeah, I think that film uses that element really well. And I think some mixing up of all these scenes, like putting you in, oh, well, I don't know if they're even together at this point or like what's going on. Because it's I'm pretty sure after the first scene, it's straight up linear the whole time.
I think so, yeah.
Which I don't know. I'm not going to tell a film like, oh, hey, mix things up, because like you can still work with a linear story. Okay, so this was one thing that I will mention as well. I don't know if Lindsay, did you want to touch on maybe one of your favorite parts? Because this is sort of like a gripe I have. We might want to do more positive stuff before that.
Oh yeah. I mean, my favorite moment is probably most people's favorite moment. It's the big fight at Charlie. Is that his name?
Yes.
Charlie's like apartment when Scarlett Johansson. I don't remember her character's name either.
Oh, I got you, Nicole.
Nicole, yeah, when she comes over and it like starts off as like a casual conversation, and then it just turns into like years and years of pent up anger and resentment just exploding at each other. And like both of their performances were amazing, but Adam Driver was just like he was shaking and crying, and I was shaking. Like it was just so emotional, and like I can't even. I was just like, I want to go back and rewatch that scene just over and over again because it was just so impactful. So that, I mean, that's probably most people's favorite moments, but that had to be mine.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting moment. I think what I was sort of throwing or alluding to, I guess, is there's almost a weird like mental thing that I do in my head when someone's like, oh yeah, this is like a best picture worthy movie, which I'm sure we're going to get to a little bit about its contention for awards. But it's almost like I don't know, when a film heralds that name where it's like, oh, it's an awardsy movie. it almost feels a little exploitative, where it's like, oh yeah, this is the money scene that's going to win the Oscar.
I see.
And that's stuff I'm doing in my own head. Like that's not the intention of Noah Baumbach. Noah Baumbach didn't go into this movie being like, yeah, this is the scene that they're going to show, and ScarJo and Adam Driver are going to win their Oscar. He was like, oh, I just want to make a really dope scene. And I'm sure that's what was going on. But in my head, I was like, they're just trying to get people to give them the best actor nominees. And one of the ones I wanted to go to, I thought this film put Laura Dern in the front seat for supporting.
Oh yeah, 100%. I thought for sure that award was going to go to Jennifer Lopez until I saw this movie, and then I was like, Laura Dern is going to win the Oscar.
I mean, there might be people that like I'm not thinking of, but I'm just like, oh yeah, that's like a force. It has powerful moments. Like it's what everything, quote unquote, a supporting performance needs. She just nailed.
She was just so entertaining. The movie was so heavy, but like she was so funny. It really needed her character.
Well, but almost in like a really like slimy way, but in a way that you can tell is gonna win over the character of Nicole, which is a complete juxtaposition to have that like horrible, terrible person of a lawyer that's being. You find out later, you're like, okay, he was sort of in a way being upfront with Charlie. But also I thought Ray Liotta was really fun.
Yes,
he was good.
Yeah, I really liked both of them. I thought were my personal favorites of the movie because, and again, I think this is completely like subjective. Is I thought this was a really interesting take on like making what is like honestly a light drama. Like it is, pretty.
It's almost a comedy.
It's almost a comedy.
I was laughing through a lot of it. Yeah.
But it's interesting because I felt like I think I enjoyed the sheer absurdity of the lawyers the most. And that was the strongest point of the movie was like even the quote unquote nice lawyer was kind of just like, I mean, like he was helping, but like it's not him that's bad as opposed to the system that's absurd. And he's basically like telling Charlie, "Oh, you can't do this; it'll look bad in court. Oh, but we won't go to court, etc." And it's just like, wait, this is hilarious! Like this is so good.
Yeah, I think he did a good job of just like showing like how bad the whole system is because they like force like this confrontation when you don't want it, and they just bleed money from you. And yeah, it's wild.
Yeah. No, I think it's interesting to point out though, Alan Alda, like perfect, like nice guy, cheap lawyer. But I think him and Ray Liotta just cancel them. Like they both cancel each other out for any sort of shot at getting a supporting nod.
I see.
Or at least
I agree.
I don't think either of them was strong enough for it, but
yeah, I mean, because the supporting actor is kind of stacked this year, I think.
Oh, for sure.
All the scenes that they had with like dealing with the legal courtroom type scenes, those were all like just signature humor, but like it was done in a really unique way from like the humor that he's done in the past. So I think it was like really like well utilized. Like that was my favorite scene was when, I mean, it wasn't super comedic, but when Laura Dern and Ray Liotta were going back and forth like in the actual courtroom, I thought that was like my favorite scene. I mean, obviously the argument scene was really well done as well. But
well, I loved it because both of them are seeing, like, because Charlie's the one that brings up, he's like, we don't want to go to court, and they're both like, yeah, we don't want to go to court, and they're both seeing like, oh yeah, this isn't what we wanted. We didn't want like it being defamed by one another and like all these rude names, just being like just calling each other out for things they don't believe. I don't know. I think this is almost like a return to old Baumbach. I know that sounds weird, but I'd mentioned this to a couple other people. It's reminiscent of like his type of writing style and like kicking and screaming, as well as the Squid and the Whale to some extent. I mean, I got some of those vibes because I thought as soon as he got divorced and started seeing Greta and so just moving on, because he had some films that he wrote while he was going through like a rough relationship that weren't the best. And I think you can see, like, While We're Young, Mistress of America, and Meyerowitz, like, those all have a very, like, delicate touch or a very different style. And I think this is more like a brutal humor, which I guess was interesting to see, like, him go back to that well, if that makes sense. I don't know if you guys are as familiar with Baumbach or...
I haven't seen a lot of his movies. I've only seen, I think, 4, but it's been years since I've seen The Squid and the Whale.
Yeah, this was my 7th, so I've seen a lot of them. But I don't know. I really do feel like this is his most it's like definitely his most mature film. So like in that sense, with like Greta helping him out,
I for sure agree with that.
But I don't know. To me, it wasn't for the better. That's like just a little bit of the problem that I had with it, because like, I mean, it's hard to relate to characters like these, like you know, both their characters, but I found it like super easy to identify with like any other of his characters that like in most of his films, even still, like, since you're not really like While We're Young is about like middle-aged couples, but like obviously like we're not in our middle ages yet, but like I could feel like some of the same things that they were feeling and going through, but like this one was just like so much harder for me to connect with anything that was happening.
Oh, that's interesting.
I sort of felt that too. Yeah, I've heard a ton of people that are like, oh yeah, like I'm a child of like a family that like got divorced, and a lot of this, like, especially because like Squid and the Whale is perspective from the kids going through a divorce, and this was a very different approach that like Evan's saying, I don't think I've ever like experienced in the same way, which sort of hint, or just the relatability is lacking a little bit.
Well, I mean, if you relate to it in that way, where being maybe like a child of divorce, I mean, I can totally understand that. And like that, if they're getting it from that end, that makes total sense, obviously.
Yeah.
But I just like, I would just say like the main relationship, you know, Scarlett Johansson and Adam Driver's characters for me, if like I'm looking at it from that perspective, I guess.
For sure. Lindsay, you were saying something? Sorry.
I was just saying that I did relate to it just because my parents did get divorced, and it was like pretty messy, and it was just like when you watch the movie and you know you don't like root for one side, but like they're both come off as kind of horrible sometimes, but then you also want to root for them. And I just like really, really connected with me personally, because it's just like you just watch these two people who seem to work well together, and then like in a second they'll just be like screaming, and like just like where you were like, how are they ever together? But then the next second they'll be in sync again, and it's like because they have all this history. And it's just so, I don't know, it was just watching them felt like watching something that I had already seen in real life.
The only thing, and I'm not disagreeing because obviously it's opinions, but the only thing like that I think hindered my experience is that I didn't felt like these people, like I felt like it was too much of a departure, like jumping off a cliff, because immediately when she went to LA, like it felt like there was actually as soon as she sits down with Laura Dern, I feel like you never think Nicole's character is going back to Charlie.
No, I don't think that you're supposed to.
But I also think she loses the respect for him as well.
Yeah, because they're going through a divorce. But you do see that there's like a connection there that's hard to like let go of, even though she does not want to be with him anymore.
Connection from ScarJo's, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it was almost like, oh hey, like Charlie clearly like messed up here, and he's trying to hold this family together, and I don't know. Okay, so getting into another problem I had, I thought this film was very one-sided in who you were supposed to root for, and maybe that's because I'm a dude, and I love Adam Driver, but part of it to me was like, oh hey, what Scarlett Johansson is sort of manipulative, and she's making Adam Driver sort of lose everything, like just to see his child. And even the simplest things, like he has to do all this garbage just to hang out with his son.
That's interesting though, because when you said that you thought it was when you thought you were rooting for one person, I thought you were going to say Scarlett Johansson. Because I was rooting for her.
Okay, well,
everything that she said
let's go.
everything that she said that he did, he deserved what was happening, you know? But like, and then you see it from his perspective, and you're like, well, he doesn't deserve all of this. But that's why I thought that it was good that you saw from both sides, because it doesn't pull you to one side. You see from both perspectives. And that's what a divorce is like. You know, where like it's not one person is right. It's just that you're like have these two lives that you're trying to combine and separate, and it's so messy and difficult. I don't know.
Yeah,
That was my point of view.
I think I would take the middle ground stance on this, like as well, because I think it's mostly like, in my opinion, it's mostly like equally sided out. But for me, the problem was like I couldn't fully understand like it seemed like a lot of it had to do with like distance and stuff, and then like Scarlett Johansson was more about her like finding herself, which I thought was very like interesting and very like well explored. But like I don't know, like just something was like missing for me. I guess like it's hard to explain.
I just thought she would like every time Adam Driver came back like to LA and he's spending all this money like for a flight. Like Lindsay, I completely understand what you're saying from the perspective, and that's you obviously know like, oh hey, you hear the cheating incident and you're like, oh well, like he should have gotten everything he had coming to him. But at the same time, like both of them aren't happy with the relationship, so like I just felt like ScarJo was acting like, oh, that's all on Adam Driver because this relationship didn't work out, and he still sort of wants this to work. And I'm moving on. It's like, well, this kid in Henry, like, I feel like she wasn't making as much of an effort because even something like, oh, hey, we got to get ready in the car, and he's got to sign all this paperwork, and the reason he's having to see all these lawyers is because she's the one that set this up. From my standpoint, I thought that was exhausting. Like, if I was that character, like, I wouldn't go to the levels of anger that he feels, but like some of that I was like, no, this makes sense. Like this all could have been avoided if they just sorted this out as people. And you're right, like there is still two sides to this, and maybe Adam Driver never signs the divorce papers and nothing ever gets done, and that's what she's seeing from this. But I was just having trouble on that front. Theo, you haven't chimed in a while though.
Oh, it's tricky because like I think they both really like suck.
Yeah.
And like because they both do things that are very like, oh wow, this is so tricky. Like, whoa, this is so nuanced. And then they both do stuff that's just like, oh no, this is like just objectively bad. Like, what the fuck? Like I think I felt an incredible amount of sympathy for Adam Driver, and I still do in a lot of ways. But then it's just like, oh, like Lamau, he actually did cheat, and it's just like very oblique, and it's just like, oh yeah, well like. Honestly, Nicole could be hammering that in way harder, but she isn't.
Oh, that's what I mean. Like, I feel like that perspective wasn't brought up. I feel like it was like one of the main things they're arguing about is which city they're in, and like the semantics of everything.
Well, yeah, but that's like a big part of why they got divorced, is because she felt like she had lost so much of her life because so much of it had been decided by him. So like that's why I felt so much sympathy for her, because she just felt like she was fading away into nothing and just like living with like all of his choices and his decisions in his life. So then finally she was like, I'm going to take this for myself, because she felt like she couldn't as like a woman and as a mother. So she was just like, okay, I'm going to do this to keep my family together, until she got a job, and then she realized I need to take care of my own life and what I want to do. And that involved moving, being around her family, and getting a divorce. So I think she was just taking her life into her own hands, and she made some bad choices, obviously, because they're not good to each other during this whole thing. It's like divorce just brings out really bad things in people.
But okay, but my thing with the whole time is I feel like the ending of this movie is like, because if we're addressing this, like the ending of the film, I feel like is beating you over the head. Like for me, like it was beating me over the head. Charlie was right. Neither of them wanted to do any of this. It all was a waste of time. Like I don't know.
I can kind of see where you're coming from with that, but I also like definitely agree with what Lindsay's saying. Like I think like it's like very easy to like understand like where Scarlett's coming from. At least to me, like it was like very, very easy to understand. Like the very first scene that she's in, like where she's talking to Laura Dern, like it's like that really long like one take or whatever. I think it's like a one take, and it just seems like you can tell like even though like she's definitely like breaking up while she's talking, and it's some of it just sounds kind of like she's like just going on about something like on a tangent, but like it kind of just goes to show like that she can't articulate what she's feeling, maybe because she feels like she doesn't have a say in anything. You know, that's kind of like what I got, and then and I thought that scene was really really strong. And like I said, just but for me, like I said, as it went on, something just like lost me, and like it didn't seem like it was so much of that anymore. But I also think that could have just been the point because like you know, divorce is just messy, and like I don't know if he's asking us to understand each of the characters' reasons. It's just maybe like a display of what's happening. That's kind of what I got.
I think like one thing that like is tricky to me because I think that's why like I think this movie is actually really really good is that it's very like a shrug. I don't know, like it's so messy.
Yeah.
It's like it reminds me of the movie A Separation where it's just like whose fault is it? It's like it's so messy. That's just what real life is. Um in that like I totally like I I feel like oh yeah no like Nicole's character like absolutely you can completely understand like her life feels like she's kind of lost that. I think it is so tricky because like the fact that she has like a kid, I feel like I felt like she of course does care for her kid. I think like it is tricky in that once she saw a lawyer, it became this like nuclear arms race where like no one wins and like the like losers are the family. And I think that like I just feel really bad for the kid because like one thing they brought up is like, well, we can't pay for this kid's college like in the same way that we could before. And it's like I wonder if there could have been like another solution.
But there was. Charlie brought it up at the beginning.
No, I agree. Like,
but he never signed the papers. Like, who knows how cooperative he would have been?
He would have signed the papers eventually.
He waited over a month.
No, he waited over a month once Laura Dern was the lawyer. And why would he do that? He needed to get another lawyer.
I know. I'm just saying, I think that, like, I know. I'm not saying that they should have gotten all those lawyers and it turned into that mess because obviously they shouldn't have. But I think that was done to show just, like, how awful the system is and how bad it is and how manipulative they are. Because they want it to be like that because they want to, like, create this competition and just take your money and
and also oh sorry
no I'm good
like that I think the thing about like him waiting the 30 days also was trying to show maybe like I mean because they even kind of went over it like well not that specifically but other points in the movie where like it possibly just could have been because he had you know he felt like he has so many priorities as it's just like oh well this isn't like a big priority to me so I'm not gonna like take it seriously. And then like it's kind of the same like I think like the first scene that Ray Liotta was in like he was kind of like well you need to take like some of these like things seriously where and then you know like Charlie was like not he wasn't like he wasn't understanding any of that.
I think that is I think you're really right on there where like I don't think he does that in a malicious way. It's just a very clear like oh he in the most literal sense he doesn't think it's as big of a deal as it is. Not that he's a bad
right.
I don't want to.
No, I'm not saying that he's a bad person.
No, totally. And so, well, so that's what I'm thinking is like, I think it's just so complicated because they both like really suck in their own ways. Like, I think both of them are like, it's just very like, both of them are very self-centered in their own very different ways, which is why I think that like it can be very like, oh, people have like very different opinions on them, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
I think maybe most of my anger just comes that maybe I have no clue about the system at all. Just wanted to throw that out there just as Lindsay was talking about this more. And maybe it's just like, you know, maybe it's so truthful to the matter. And that's sort of like what's played for comedy. And I'm just like, no, this is exhausting, right? Like everybody sees it.
it can just be the way he frames it, because like it's just like interesting. Like I don't know, like we were talking about this. I don't know if anybody's seen like The Squid and the Whale, but like it's going over a similar situation, but it's so different from this movie, like in so many ways.
Like really weird.
So like, and it's just like I don't want to go too much into that film, but like I think it could just be the way that he's framing, more of the relationship in this film. I feel like it's very focused in on that more than anything.
Interesting. Okay, I'd have to watch that. So it's interesting to hear that like they're both stories about divorce, and one is much earlier in his career. Is that his debut actually, or?
No, it's Kicking and Screaming is his debut.
I just watched Kicking and Screaming recently.
Yeah, okay. I watched it a month ago.
I kind of want to touch on that a little bit. I feel like, I haven't seen like the 3 like scripts he did, or Mr. Jealousy, or the TV movie he did, like in between. But like Kicking and Screaming to me is like a very like male dominant, doesn't even give like females a written character. And maybe obviously like Lindsay being the shining example, like I'm sure tons of people got the same, because people are saying ScarJo's character is great, but I feel like that character like wasn't explored enough, because I thought in the first act it was done tremendously, where it's like, oh hey, she's actually like, she's doing what she says in that monologue, where she's starting to feel herself. And I felt like that could have been done a whole lot better if they would have been going back. And I always love when movies do this with different perspectives, and they would have been showing, oh well, here's what ScarJo is feeling in this, or Nicole is feeling in this scene that's going on, and then they go to Charlie, and maybe he doesn't catch up on the signs that clearly like something's wrong. Clearly she doesn't feel heard, or anything like that. And
so you wanted more of like their relationship in the past?
I feel like that was sorely missed for me to attach on and understand like everything that was going on in their relationship. Just because when they're arguing in that scene, and I do think it's an amazing scene where they're both just letting everything loose, is that I feel like we don't really have too much perspective, like to give.
But I kind of like that we didn't have a perspective of their past, because that lets their like current relationship be more ambiguous. So we're not like I don't know, like we don't go into it already having a side, because we don't actually know what their relationship was like. So we're just going based on what this process is like. And so it leaves it more ambiguous, where it's like they're both wrong and right. Whereas I think if we had seen more of their past, we would have maybe leaned one way or the other.
I can understand that.
Yeah,
it's a slippery slope. Like I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh, I'm a better writer than Noah Baumbach, who's like one of the greatest screenwriters working right now.
Yeah, I think that's like what I've been saying. I think it's just the way it's framed. It's like I think it's okay that he didn't give us all the background information, but like I could see why someone would want that, and especially like it's another issue that I have. But like I said, I can see why people would prefer it to be more open-ended. But like if you look at a lot of his other films, like every character always like has very specific things that they're feeling, or situations that they've had that goes over their past or something. So like in this movie, it just feels weird that it's completely like not present, besides like the things about like him cheating and stuff like that. So yeah, like I said, it's a negative for me, but I could definitely see why other people really like it.
Would love it. Yeah,
for sure. That's it. Like I said, it's a hard movie to rate for me.
I do think, I almost wonder, just obviously like tons of people have brought this up. I wonder how much of this is Baumbach like almost making a film like in a therapeutic way, about like his own divorce, because I know it wasn't like the best of divorces from my understanding, and obviously people have brought up like, oh yeah, that's sort of, it's a writer exploring themes he's been through. Like tons of writers have done that, but I wondered, do you guys think anything of that? Like I just mentioned that because I thought going out of it, as I mentioned, I'm team pro Charlie, and I thought that to me was him coming across as, oh, hey, I was right in this divorce. But obviously tons of people are getting a more fair perspective. But curious to see what you guys think.
I don't know. I didn't get like I was right. So I don't know. I feel like if he was doing that, it would have been more like vitriol of like Scarlett Johansson's character. Like she would have been portrayed more like horribly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
I
I
think he
feel
was
like if
just
he was
trying to
doing that, it'd
show.
be too on the nose, and people would know very quickly.
Yeah,
Like I
maybe.
feel like he almost did some of this stuff. It from from the way
I
I was
can just.
watching the movie, it almost felt like he was doing it subconsciously.
I thought it was just more like this is my perspective of the events, and that he still felt sympathy for her, like in like retrospect, kind of a thing.
For sure.
Oh, yeah. I really agree with that. Like, it does seem middle grounded enough to me that it's not like malicious or anything, and maybe not like super self-serving. I mean, therapeutic, yes, but like self-serving as in like I don't think he's feeling like happy or he's feeling like bigger than
Yeah.
who was it?
Jennifer Jason Leigh.
Yeah. And it's kind of like I have this like conspiracy, and like this could be completely unrelated, but I think it's a similar thing when with Spike Jones is her, like it like
Spike Jones
it's
notorious
very
for dating robots, of course.
yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna suspect it was like when he was dating Sofia Coppola, but like
For
it's
sure.
like this. It's a very similar vibe where like it's really an examination of their relationship, and then they made a movie about it. And I feel like this film is very well intentioned enough. Like I said, I think it's very middle grounded enough, so I can't like criticize it too much for that.
For sure. Yeah, I have one last thing I'll throw out to you guys, just because we were talking in the film club chat about this with a couple people that had seen it. And I just came up with an idea, and I don't think this isn't to take away from this film, but I just thought of it, and I was like, oh, this would be fascinating. Because Noah Baumbach and Greta Gerwig are in a relationship, I just keep thinking to myself, how cool would it have been if Noah Baumbach and Adam Driver went off on one side and they worked together and wrote this whole like separate story about their perspective, and then Greta and Scarlett Johansson worked on their separate side, and then you slowly like piece that film together and try to make it work. That could be way messier than this. I for sure understand that going like throwing this idea out, but I think it could be fascinating seeing that like a different lens for both different perspectives. I think could have I don't know, it could have been a way different story.
That's very interesting.
I think that's a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna steal it and use it.
I think I'm really like, oh man, I'm gonna sound dumb. But I don't really need to look it up. Did like Greta Gerwig, did she write Lady Bird, and like she wrote like scripts for like, has she done screenplay before?
She wrote screenplays for Frances Ha, I believe.
Okay,
I think she was on Mistress America. She for sure wrote Lady Bird. But I'll get that stuff up.
Yeah, she wrote Frances Ha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would actually be really interesting. Maybe
There's problems you could run into. Like it's very difficult narratively to
See, I don't know that he would want his current relationship's perspective on his past relationship. I think that might add another level of confusion and chaos.
Yeah.
That the movie didn't need.
I mean, it seems like too much of a personal, like, because it's his current relationship, so I don't know about that. Like, I think like there's another. I'm trying to remember. Like, there's another movie that like I know like both couples like wrote it. Like, there was a couple that wrote it, and oh my god, I can't like not remember.
Couple that wrote a movie.
I love going on tangents.
The Safdie
like,
brothers?
No. Oh, okay, yeah.
They do kiss each other.
Okay, yeah. No, last year, like that Paul Dano's film Wildlife.
Oh, I never saw it. Dang.
Okay, yeah. Him and his partner Zoe Kazan. Yeah.
Oh, I want to see that.
He had written the script, and like if you've seen the movie, it's very like it's also very middle grounded and deals with a divorce and separation.
Oh, I do want to see it now.
And she actually like I'm pretty sure like it was an interview or something. She like came in and rewrote it with him. So they're both credited as writers on it, and like I think it's something like that. But like I don't think you could do it otherwise. Like, I don't know.
I understand that. Yeah, I just meant to get like a female perspective to write that portion of the story.
Well, I wonder what it would be like if you got Jennifer Jason Leigh's perspective.
Yeah, well, see, that's almost like what I feel like that wouldn't work out. Like, I don't know if I don't know how easy it would be to call agents and be like, hey,
yeah.
I don't know. That'd be like next level screenwriting. Oh my gosh,
It'd be
crazy.
Thank you to my 3 hosts for coming on and doing a more, obviously it got a little bit heated in a fun way. And, just going through all this fun stuff with all the awards movies there are. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Theo.
Yeah.
Jeez, Theo.
Theo.
You're not a Pokemon.
Life would be easier if I was.